death
I think the public has indicated many times that the death penalty should be available for the worst of the worst, the cream of the crud. And I think what we know is that murder is a dirty, ugly, grisly, grimy business. But that should not be the case with politics. It is, to a degree, but it should not be the case. The public ought to be able to weigh in to say that murder in a community that shocks the conscience and changes the way people behave in their homes ought to be treated with the ultimate punishment for the ultimate crime.
So have you gotten calls to your office from the public at all?
Well, the public has often indicated to all prosecutors wherever they live that yes, we do believe that this penalty, the death penalty, when properly applied, should be reserved for the worst of the worst. And everybody tries to come to the table at a different place and tries to make their vote seem secure, talking themselves into a vote that they're comfortable with. But this is about a reflection of society, reflection of people who do not commit murder, reflection of people who go to school, pay their taxes, raise their kids, mow their grass, are good neighbors. Those persons ought to be reflected in this vote, and they're not. It ought to be that people who steal the life of others and do it in the most heinous fashion ought to be subjected to the death penalty, and that's the case.
So what do you think about life in prison?
I think that life in prison without parole, if the person who has committed a murder to 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 people, if the ceiling they can get in the criminal courts is life in prison without parole, and the prosecution said, look, or the defense lawyer says, look, I'm willing to take something less than life in prison without parole. What is it, 50 years? An offender would say there's a distinction without a difference. Life in prison without parole, 50 years, I think I'll have a trial and take my chances. Maybe I'll ring the bell. The truth is that life without parole is not an adequate reflection of the worst of the worst crimes in America. If you can get life in prison without parole for killing 1 person, what does it say about the person that kills 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? That anything after 1 is a freebie. That's not how America should be. That's not a balance.
But there haven't been executions since 1999.
Not for lack of trying from the prosecution. You know, the legislative reforms that have been put into place were put into place firmly. The prosecutors have responded to that, and to say that the efforts of the abolitionists and the people who want to keep the death penalty at bay from society, to say that therefore, since there hasn't been an execution in 10 years, must mean that it's not working, is a backward, turned on its head type of thought. Because the prosecutors of America and of Illinois have worked hard and courageously to take the people who are the worst and to have them meet the penalties of the death penalty, and people who want to keep that from happening have agendas that have nothing to do with law and order.
But they said there might be enough votes to pass abolishing the death penalty.
Well, I don't think that it takes a person of courage to 22 hours before the entire session ends and we have a changeover of people who are in the Senate and the House. I don't think it takes a person of courage to vote to abolish the death penalty now. In fact, it's the least most susceptible time for a legislator to stand in the face of public opinion now, one day after inaugural balls, during a tax hike session, during issues of workers' compensation. Oh, I know, by the way, why don't we squeeze that death penalty thing into all this mix? So it's really the opportunity for a legislator to be most camouflaged, to be most protected, and to have it all junked up in the midst of other issues and not to have a valuable public debate on an issue so important.